The film Spotlight is garnering a lot of awards buzz this year for its actors and for the compelling story it tells about the revelations by the Boston Globe of child sexual abuse by Catholic priests and the cover-up by the church. While this was going on, and for decades before, there were other boys and girls, these in an exclusive prep school in New York City, who were being molested by trusted and revered teachers. Amos Camille, a former student at the Horace Mann School, along with Sean Elder, write about the sex scandal in their book, Great is the Truth, Secrecy, Scandal, and the Quest for Justice at the Horace Mann School. Much of the abuse in Massachusetts and other places went on for decades in secret. Why have these stories come out now? Why are people talking about their experiences as children in their middle age? Camille says it's like a dam bursting.
The Boston Globe just broke that whole story wide open, and it enabled people to see that they were not the only people that this had happened to as children. That's part of it. I think just the floodgates open, and that leads to Penn State. And, Penn State was literally the thing that made me pursue the Horace Mann case. And I think the other factor here is the Internet. I think brands and dioceses and schools or brands also were able to control their story in the past. So if something like this happened, an administrator would say, let's keep this between us. You wouldn't want to hurt the school or the church. Today, with the rise of the Internet, everybody's got a Twitter account. These stories are really hard to contain.
Camille was not molested at Horace Mann, but several of his friends were. He was a middle-class kid who went to school on a baseball scholarship, and he admits he loved the 3 years he spent there. 10 years after graduation, though, he and some school friends went on a camping trip, and the stories about abuse came out.
There were 5 of us. And Andrew, on one night, sort of cleared his throat and said, guys, when I was in 8th grade, I was raped by Mark Wright, the football coach. And it was what happened next that really surprised everybody, or surprised me. We all went around the campfire with different strange stories, and 3 of the 5 of us had been abused. I was not abused at Horace Mann or ever, but it was 3 different teachers. And it wasn't until 20 years, we all moved on with our lives, and we had families, and we remained friendly, but it didn't really come up again.
After the priest and the Penn State abuse were revealed, though, Camille says that people were willing to come out with the personal stories of molestation that they had held in for years.
I called up Andrew, and I said, how are you doing? I mean, his abuser was a football coach as well. And he said, I'm not doing too well. I wish somebody would write about it. And I began to write about it, and that ultimately became the front page story at the Times Magazine called Prep School Predators. And at that time, I had exposed 3 predators. We are now up to 22. And that's really what I chronicle in Great is the Truth, the mushrooming, if you will, of the allegations, and incredible allegations, I should say.
Camille says that schools, camps, and sports clubs are often the places where predators find employment because that's where they'll find the most young, impressionable kids. He says that most of these molesters are very patient and carefully choose victims. That, along with uncertainty, is what keeps these crimes so secret for so long.
It's a very hard thing to identify. So I was laboring under the impression that everybody knew, and I had to soften that to a certain extent. Certainly many people did know, and they didn't come forward. They had blinders on. They didn't really understand. They didn't want to poke and prod too much. It's a very difficult thing to accuse your coworker of actually sexually abusing a child. How do you know what happens when, they're going off in a classroom alone? It's sort of a crime written in invisible ink.
Camille says that the predators are also very good at manipulating their victims into keeping quiet.
In a way, it's almost like it's part of the seduction. So you take a vulnerable kid or any kid and you say, hey, you know what, there's something special about you. And then when it very slowly leads up to the act of abuse, and the kid feels part of it in a way because it's between him or her and the abuser. And that's part of the con. Part of the grooming process, to make the kid feel like it's consensual. And then it's like a secret, us against the world. And then that secret gets locked in for decades. Most people never speak about this. That's changing, I hope, slowly. But people don't speak about this into their 40s, 50s, and 60s. Certainly not when you're 13 or 14.
Although young girls are molested in greater numbers than boys, Camille says it's especially difficult for boys to admit that they were abused by another male.
They say say that the number is about 1 in 4 girls and 1 in 6 boys. So actually girls get abused more. But with boys, particularly if it's man against boy violence, if you will, you don't get a lot of credibility when you're a 14-year-old boy in the lunchroom when you tell your friend that the teacher did something like this to you. You're going to be called a homosexual. Whether or not you are, you just learn to keep it inside. And sometimes when kids and boys in particular do talk about it, they're either made fun of or they're not believed. They're told to just move on with their lives. And when you get enough of those messages, you just lock it away in a file, and it doesn't come out till many, many years later. And it usually comes out as a result of either having a kid around your age at the time you were abused, or your life falling apart in other ways, whether it be divorce or alcoholism and drugs. So very few men actually reported it. The shame is so deep.
His best friend came out about 6 months after his New York Times piece ran, and Camille says he hopes the shame of what happened to him and other children gets placed not on the victims, but where it belongs, on the predators. Some people think that the accusers are just in it for a big payday, but Camille says it's far more complicated than that.
Most adult sexual abuse survivors are not in it for the money. They're in it for 2 reasons mostly. One, to acknowledge that this happened to them, and then from someone from the institution, whether it be the Catholic Church or a camp or a school, somebody to say sorry. And what this has turned into in some ways with mediation is that, oh, you're just looking for millions of dollars. Many people are not. Many of these folks, and I've met them, can barely get out of bed in the morning. But the money helps, but it can't repair decades of shattered lives.
Rules about settlements from sexual abusers and their employers are different across the country. And Camille says that New York State's statute of limitations is especially draconian. Since so much of the abuse took place decades ago, he says that the school found it could play hardball with the victims and win.
You have until 23 years old to come forward to file a claim. So all of these, since this has happened in the past, and most of these folks were 40s and 50s and 60s, they were well past the statute of limitations. So when 32 survivors from Horace Mann entered into a mediation process with the Horace Mann School, and the school took the position, we don't have to pay you anything. They looked at it almost like a mergers and acquisitions negotiation, real hardball, to the extent that if the victims' lawyers were asking for, let's say $1 million, they would throw back a number like, okay, we'll give you $10,000. These kind of tactics. And the victims were demoralized. Many talked about re-traumatization. Why is the school that has billions of dollars, on the board alone? Why are they doing this to us? So while they did take the mighty Horace Mann to the table, they didn't really get much. Very few did.
There's an effort by several organizations and politicians to get that statute of limitations changed or eliminated so victims of any age can come forward and have their allegations heard. Camille says he'd like to see that, and a restorative justice movement put in place for Horace Mann victims.
Best known as what happened in South Africa, the Truth and Reconciliation Commissions. You have victims and perpetrators in the same room talking to each other, and you need to listen to each other's stories. So I imagine that I think the only way that Horace Mann can actually get through this on a broader level is to have a sustained series of dialogues, mediated, but with teachers, maybe some of the abusers, maybe some of the current parents and students, and to see how this actually affected and to break down the barriers of talking about it. I really believe that until that happens, Horace Mann's not going to get past this. People are always going to wonder if they did the right thing.
Talking to an abuser is something that Camille did and writes about in his book. He says he got mixed messages from the teacher who abused a female student.
I went and I visited a fellow up in Vermont that I knew very well. And he's a conflicted bundle of emotions. At the same time, he knows that what he did was wrong. He's also combative. He's unapologetic. And the next minute he is apologetic, calling the girl a liar, and yet getting aggressive. And it's an interesting portrait about what these guys think. And it's not my place to judge these teachers. I wanted to show him in his own words. You can judge the acts. The actor is a complex human being. Many people loved him as an English teacher, and yet he did these horrible things. And that's a hard thing for us to hold at the same time.
Mediation, confrontation, restorative justice strategies can be helpful after the fact. Camille says we need to get better at preventing these crimes so more children are not subjected to abuse in the first place.
We have to become better trained in understanding signs while hiring teachers and signs along the way. We're getting better at that. There are many services available today that were not even 10 years ago.
You can read about how the abuse unfolded at Horace Mann School in New York and about the lives of the victims and the perpetrators in Amos Camille's and Sean Elder's book, Great is the Truth, available in stores and online. You can find out more about Camille on his website, amoscamille.com. For more information about all of our guests, log on to our site at viewpointsonline.net. You can find archives of past programs there and on iTunes and Stitcher. I'm Gary Price.
Medicare and their list of suppliers continue to change, so if you have diabetes, it may affect where you get your testing supplies. But rest assured that your number one doctor-recommended one-touch testing supplies are always covered by Medicare Part B at your local pharmacy and approved mail-order suppliers. Dr. Brian Levy, Chief Medical Officer at LifeScan, maker of one-touch products.
Some mail-order suppliers may offer a limited selection of diabetes testing supplies. They may try to switch you to a different brand, saying your current products are no longer covered. That's just not true. You are entitled to continue using the products you know and trust and that have been recommended by your healthcare professional at no additional cost.
Remember, you have a choice. Stay with the number one brand used by Medicare patients. For questions about coverage or where to get your one-touch testing supplies, call 1-866-621-6216 or visit www.onetouch.com/Medicare. Medicare Part B is not a guarantee of coverage and payment, which may be subject to coinsurance, deductible, and patient eligibility requirements.
Quaker is on the hunt for America's next great oatmeal flavor with the Bring Your Best Bowl contest. Simply submit your oatmeal flavor using 2 to 5 ingredients along with your creative inspiration for a chance to win $250,000 and inspire Quaker's newest oatmeal flavor. As an actress, cooking show host, and mom of 2, Tiffany Thiessen knows a thing or two about tasty creations.
I'm excited to be a part of Quaker's Bring Your Best Bowl contest because I love the endless combinations you can cook up with oatmeal. From savory to sweet, for breakfast, lunch, or dinner, there are so many yummy ways to enjoy it. Enter your oatmeal submission now by visiting bringyourbestbowl.com. You'll also find a little oatspiration from videos and my own favorite recipes.
No purchase necessary. Open to legal residents of the 50 U.S. states, D.C. or Puerto Rico. 18 years of age or older at time of entry. Find the official rules and more details at bringyourbestbowl.com. Void where prohibited. Enter now through March 12, 2016. That's bringyourbestbowl.com. Sponsor the Quaker Oats Company.